This is Navigating Cyber Risk podcast with me, John Riley, and George Yasir as your hosts. Join us as we explore the challenges faced by executives as they grapple with new and ever-changing cybersecurity mandates. Welcome to another episode of Navigating Cyber Risk. I'm John Riley, and today we have an amazing guest who is a former finance professional who has practiced yoga enough to qualify as a pretzel. He loves expanding his mind with such good books that he sends his customers one on an annual basis. Welcome, Yasir. How are you?
I'm good, John. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
We're looking forward to some pretzels now. All right.
So I'm not going to point it out or anything, but I'm George Yasir. So, John, sometimes every once in a while we do these podcasts, and John forgets to introduce me, and I think I pay him back the favor from time to time as well. It's a pleasure to have you here, Yasir.
George, thanks for having me. Nice meeting you as well.
So we're just going to jump right in here. So, Yasir, how would you explain the difference between what cybersecurity is and what cyber risk is if you were talking to an executive?
I think as an executive, cybersecurity ends up becoming a ball of headaches and some form of risk, although it's not quite well defined in people's mind. Cybersecurity is an overall umbrella construct, which talks about anything related to my data being at risk. And the risk is actually quantifying what that looks like and what that means for someone's organization.
All right. And so what cybersecurity risks do you see companies facing today? What's the most significant ones? I mean, where do those risks come from for the most part?
I mean, they're numerous, right? The cybersecurity breaches have been triple-digit percentage increase year over year last year. We expect the same to happen this year. With the adoption of AI, not only are enterprises getting tools to make their life easier, but also the bad guys are. So the ability to do social engineering, to hack in, use someone's password to be able to go after a soft target in the enterprise, and then be able to then breach or create malwares that can then essentially lock you as an organization out of your own data, stop operations altogether. There's a United Healthcare, which is one of their partners right now, cannot service their customers, tens of thousands of customers on their billing side. Microsoft has an ongoing breach going on, which is mind-blowing. It's just been months in the making. It's still going on. And these are the ones we know about. And as a small business or mid-size enterprise or large enterprise, you are as strong as the weakest link in your organization. And that usually means that the employee who has not changed the password in some time, or someone who is using the same password everywhere, or someone who loves to shop online and click on every offer that's sent to them on their email, or can basically pick up the phone and divulge their social security numbers to anyone asking. The risks are numerous, but it kind of, I would say, human risk is probably the biggest footprint out there for any enterprise.
I actually just saw something that said like 65 or 70% of breaches are caused by humans at this point. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And as you said, during that chain of risk transference, there's a potential, even if you're using Microsoft or some large company, that they've got some sort of breach going on that they may or may not know about. So you can transfer some of that risk by using online providers, but there's never, you still have to make that decision and be cognizant of what data you're sharing with them and make sure that they're doing all the right things. So
third-party risk is probably the other 30-40% of that risk kind of bucket that looks like. We have been talking about, I've been coming from finance, obviously third-party risk, counterparty risk was a piece. Any trade you get into with a counterparty on a derivative, or you buy a bond or sell a bond to someone on borrow, that counterparty goes down, you get the financial crisis, for example. That was one major use case of how counterparty risk can affect the entire environment. And so as an enterprise, data you're sharing with third party, you have data processing agreements in place in the EU, and in the US also a lot of companies are demanding it. Those are just scratching the surface in terms of understanding what that risk is. And we see that risk transference piece of the risk that is not quantified very well in organizations in general.
Agreed. And I think overall, so when you're talking to CEOs, I mean, do you feel like they're prioritizing that cyber risk? I mean, are you seeing it where they're causing sales, especially with third party risk transference and using third party vendor management? What are your feelings on that?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, there is a board level action item now on every board meeting talking about cyber risk. Cyber insurance used to be a piece where I'll take a cyber insurance and I'm good to go, but I think people have woken up to that might not be enough coverage for the mission critical work they're doing, but companies being locked out for tens of days from doing any business, which could be like basically the Achilles heel of killing a business in many cases. But there is so much technicalities involved around. I'll just give you a perfect one example. When you think about counterparty risk, it's about like, okay, who are the contractors from third party who are accessing our system? That could be one angle of the risk, but no one is talking about my Microsoft 365, how I'm sharing my documents with a link with my counterparties, with my third parties, with my partners, with my wider partners, and what those partners are sharing those links, the same my data with third party ahead of that. That chain event of counterparty risk that kind of transpires from there on, people don't have any understanding of that right now in the marketplace. There's just one example of that.
Yeah, you have to be very careful about what data you're storing and understand what that is, and then who you provide access to, whether they're a partner or not, whether there's an NDA or not. I mean, that's even if you have an NDA, are they moving? Are they sharing it? All depends on who you're sharing it with.
Yeah, and in the finance land, which I think has been ahead of the game from a data protection perspective by at least 20 years to the rest of the market, the idea around data retention policies, after 7 years, you're required to purge the data, or in some cases, like some organizations made it a point, like go purge it. The more data you store, you are adding more risk to it. Yes, it's great. I can do a look back to my analytics engine, see a graph which goes back an extra 10 years. But reality is the value of that last beyond 7 years in many cases, and other than looking pretty and making the graph look smoother, might be de minimis. And you're just adding to a lot of risk to your own enterprise by storing and never purging it.
Well, I'm curious, is this, we always have these, pardon me, we always have these challenges with cybersecurity, and I refer to it as the footprint of protection. But ultimately now the bigger risk is these looming sanctions that are coming down. So it does make me question, why would an organization not want to improve their data protection position, knowing that the sanctions can be so incredibly steep that it's mere pennies to make that investment for data protection, as well as what essentially are policies, procedures, and programs to make sure the organization is handling sensitive data carefully. So what's your perspective on some of these sanctions and how, let's call them cyber laws or regulations, and some of the things that you see in the news every day about companies being fined? What do you think that's going to do to impact these kind of more like medium-sized businesses that are out there? And do you think they're going to have to pay the price?
I mean, ultimately, it's just the small guys that have had to pay the price, because the regulations come in because some big company has caused the leak to happen, and everyone else needs to suffer from it, even though there may be a less ideal target for the large hacking groups. But to answer your question, why it's not been done, or why it's not been done to the extent it needs to be done, I would say it's a lot of it is related to complexity. I'll give you a perfect example. I used to do a lot of master data management program work in my past life as a consultant at large banks and insurance companies. Just to even understand what you need to protect, you need to know what systems you have in your environment, who's using them, and what data is in them. Even that simple exercise, which can even be the step one to do anything else beyond that, very few organizations had a full handle on that. And this was exercise we were doing to try to see what can be moved over to the cloud, what data needs to go there, what privacy policies get impacted if you move it to maybe an AWS environment versus locally in your Equinox Center, for example. And it's just a sheer complexity of it. And a lot of times, these programs were run very bureaucratically. And that what I saw from firsthand experience in the trenches to be the main cause, where just sheer understanding, having a classification, having a glossary of what you even possess in a nice, neat format was the biggest stumbling block.
I think sometimes I wonder if organizations realize that their data flows like water, or even worse, like a soda spilled in a car, right? I mean, it's goes into the carpet, it goes into the floorboards, right? It's unstructured. It kind of just goes wherever gravity takes it sometimes. And organizations that aren't really focusing on that are kind of understanding where's their data. They're the ones that are going to struggle. So, what do you think they should do to fix that, or what do you think they should do to address it?
So historically, when people talked about data protection or data privacy, it used to be around let's go scan our databases, where the golden sources of copy used to reside. Now, though, a lot of work is happening with documents which come in an email. Maybe they'll make their way into your OneDrive or SharePoint, and then they'll get edited there, collaborated over there. The final document will just go via out an email. So nothing will happen with the historic kind of database environments, which used to be where a lot of transaction information used to sit. Most of the information now, more and more information now, let me rephrase, is happening unstructured. And organizations have finally waking up, I guess. It's changing now. We're seeing it changing, where there are AI-enabled services available to understand what is in those documents, what is being said, what's sensitive, how is it being at risk, who is it being shared with. So there are tools available, and I think organizations are finally catching up to it, and hopefully it'll be done sooner than later.
So from your perspective, what emerging trends do you see that are having a profound impact in the near future?
So we talk about AI a lot. Obviously, that is getting a lot of airtime, a lot of middle management and senior management times and board level time in terms of how should an AI strategy look like. And one of the impediments we're seeing from the market is exactly what the White House is talking about, what the regulations is talking about, what George kind of hinted on a little bit from an AI governance perspective, is around what data is going into my LLM model, a third-party LLM model, and what can be extracted out of that with some clever prompt engineering. So it just comes down to a very simple heuristic. What information is loaded being in the model, and what information can get out of the model by my employees or someone else, maybe some other organization, if it's a third-party tool. And that's kind of where understanding that what information I possess that needs to go in the training the model, understanding where that information resides, that needs to improve. Like we've had technologies, legacy technologies out there which have tried to do it, have failed. But understanding what's sitting in your most collaborative, most rigorously used workflow environments, and I can name them in like two hands. Microsoft tools, your ServiceNow ticketing system, for example. It could be your CMDB. It could be your Salesforce environment. It could be your email systems. That's kind of where most of the information, your golden sources of copy are sitting. And understanding what's in there and how that's being transacted is probably the first step. Second step is, if you are looking to deploy AI, if you are looking to deploy or build services yourself or use a contractor to build some AI chatbots that your customers can use or your employees can use, then having some sense of what data is going into those training models is kind of where I see to be the biggest opportunity, which kills two birds in one stone. It makes you more AI enabled also for future, but also future proofs your any AI investments just by understanding these big systems, the big platforms you're using, which contain customer data or your company data.
I've seen where there's a certain pushback on from an employee standpoint of when they're training AI to give it false information on purpose, to try and make it so that it has false information. But I think overall, I mean, if you've got multiple sources and everything else, I think you'll be okay. So, have you worked with a company or been around a company that's had some sort of disaster, and what's that disaster journey look like for them? I mean, after a hacker succeeds in stealing sensitive data, and that feeling of their heart dropping, their jaw dropping, you know, have you been around anything like that?
Yes, and it's not fun. I mean, you have multiple levels of these kind of transgressions that take place. You might have a UAT environment or a testing environment, which is non-prod, where someone comes in and basically starting to mine Bitcoin, and you won't even know it for months and months, and your cloud bill has gone into hundreds and thousands of dollars. That, by the way, is not uncommon. I would seriously encourage your viewers to look at the cloud bills more aggressively on a monthly basis, just because of that risk by itself. Because it's one of those things that they can just like keep humming along in the background, maybe with some kind of variance, and you won't even know it. The catastrophic kind of environments, we would get involved in some cases. We it's not our main bread and butter, but it's not pleasant. Like literally, you have business owners who think they might be going out of business. Really, if this like your transaction system or your inventory system or your order system does not come back online, but you have to shut it down because the hacker is basically going and encrypting your hard drives, your cloud information, wherever the access is still available. So having good backups, I mean that's been a good kind of good fallback. Like, okay, maybe it's not a backup from yesterday, even if it's a backup from last week, at least there's some sort of comfort, like, okay, I can go back to some data if I need to restore it once I kind of identify where the hacker came from, and I can kind of plug that hole in. But I think the advice I have and what the practitioners have given to customers is to assume you're going to have this and just be ready for it as a disaster recovery plan. We used to, in the old days, used to go to a data center in Mahwah, New Jersey, and sit on a terminal and do the disaster recovery from post September 11th. That was one method of doing it. After Hurricane Sandy, we did the similar analysis. Banks used to do that all the time. They still have these backup facilities in the data centers available with terminals. How can you work with multiple apps in one small screen? Same advice I will have for currently. What will happen? What will our mode of action be? What is available in employees' devices themselves they can use if they have to kind of go down to a backup service, assuming that their main systems are down.
Yeah, and it's very much like trying to plan for that. If you haven't practiced it, it's going to be a rough challenge. Not knowing who to contact, when, where, what an actual emergency is. Definitely something to be practiced within an organization. All right, so Yasir, tell us, how did you get started? Tell us tell us a bit about you and your company, and where'd you come from?
So, I was used to be in the finance world. Like, I was a bond trader, a developer, building mortgage systems, and saw counterparty risk kind of work its way through the system in a spectacular way with the financial crisis when I was trading subprime mortgages on a proprietary trading desk at Barclays in circa 2008 through 10. I used to be a bunch of hedge funds before, but really kind of what led me to where I am right now as a founder of a cybersecurity company called Polymer. We are a data security platform. We basically, this is learnings from 10 years of consulting work I did for large financial services organizations and technology firms around thinking about data privacy and technology and tooling around that, and saw what was missing. And one of the big pieces was understanding unstructured data sets. That is what led to Polymer. We launched this company 3 years ago. It's VC backed. We basically service large enterprises in, number one, data observability, understanding what information you have or your employees have in their emails, in their file storage systems like OneDrive, Google, and then also be able to detect anytime sensitive data or customer data is leaking or being sent or being downloaded, and then be able to stop it also. And then one of the things innovation we have in our product we really kind of are proud of is is bringing in employees as part of the solution. Historically, security teams would kind of do this as a whack-a-mole exercise, which is not quite scalable. The employees, if they are doing something wrong, usually don't mean it. 80% of the time, it's just sloppy behavior. Nudging them, training them, hey, you're doing something wrong. You might want to take another look at it, or there might be a better way to do it. That gentle nudging goes a long way in making sure these events don't happen in the first place. So that's been kind of like what has resonated in terms of educating your employees into be better data citizens. Usually it comes down to a lot of times it's just lack of understanding what is right or wrong. And we have seen information security training programs fail in how best to use SaaS products, especially.
I think sometimes when somebody's told to go through a training session, or they kind of just gloss over some of those, how to stop the leaks, or what is information that they shouldn't necessarily share, or when the phone rings, they just want to be helpful. That's definitely something where you just want to answer the question and try and be the best you can. But that sometimes is a leak of who the CFO is, or who, maybe not publicly available information, but can definitely cause some issues. So now I'm going to ask an abnormal question. Is this something that actually runs on a desktop, or is it something that runs on the server, your application?
So it's pretty straightforward. We are cloud-based, so it's a very easy install. We just need the admin on the customer side for your Google or Microsoft products, whoever is the system admin, basically to handshake with our APIs, and then we're in business. So installation takes about 15 minutes, even for the largest organizations. So we've done it for companies like CVS Pharmacy, Edward Jones, RSA Security, to name a few. And after that, it's a fairly straightforward way. We have a bunch of templates, a bunch of roadmaps for people to kind of get going, mature, and harden the data governance program. Pretty straightforward to use, and slightly tightening up the dials as the journey kind of progresses at an organization.
Well, and also tell us a little bit about, how did you get into yoga, and that part of it?
It was pure accident, basically. You needed something to do, and my friend said there's a Bikram yoga class nearby where my house is, and I just started going. I went once, and teacher laughed me out of the door because I was so much pain, and then I didn't do anything for a couple of years. But then I got back into it, and that's been a great kind of way to keep the mind sharp and keep the stresses away a little bit.
And the body more flexible, right?
Body more flexible also, and strength that comes with it. Yes.
Excellent. So if you're working on all these things, what's the thing that you're most excited about and what you're working on currently?
We're really getting a lot of pull from the market and doing a lot of AI enablement safely. Rather than going and getting a third-party service to connect into your enterprise data set directly, we provide a very easy way to do it through our guardrails, which can monitor the data flows, make sure what's going in the third-party models, what's coming out is governed, and we have very easy ways of zapping out sensitive data if you set up the policy that way also. So pretty excited about that work to allow businesses to safely enable AI very fast.
Okay, great. And so getting towards the end here, but I mean, tell me, what's one action item that you would want our audience to be aware of, and specifically, what advice or tip would you give for reducing the cyber risk?
I mean, from my viewpoint, take a look at what's sitting in your SaaS environments and who has access to it. Your head of IT or even your CIO might not even know what's sitting in your OneDrive and where the files are being shared with and how long they've been shared with. Even after long gone, after the contractor is no longer working with your company, you'll be surprised how much data is just sitting nilly-willy out there, accessible from the outer world. That'll be step one. That's an easy way to see also how much it's a good proxy also for the risk of your overall data profile from a data posture perspective, data security posture perspective for the wider organization. That's just one simple test.
Excellent. All right, Yasir, we appreciate your time and thank you for your insight on this. I think that we've got a great future both with AI, and sounds like your tool is great at finding the data and pulling that in. So we appreciate it. Audience, we thank you for listening. And if you've learned something today, laughed, or just smiled or something, please tell somebody about this podcast. And there it is. This has been another great episode of Navigating Cyber Risk with your host, John and George. I remembered George this time, and we'll hope to see you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Yasir. Appreciate you.
This was another amazing episode of Navigating Cyber Risk, powered by Omnistruct. Show us some love by subscribing and sharing today. Reach out to us with any comments, questions, or ideas about future shows by emailing us at podcast@omnistruct.com. Until next time, remember, governance is not a technology.